Welcome to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. On this week's episode, it's all about the biography and best hits of Ambrose Akinmusire. For over 15 years, Ambrose Akinmusire has walked a line between the center and the edge of jazz, quietly becoming one of its most essential voices while never quite staying in one place. He's not just a trumpeter, he's not just a composer, he's a seeker, a creator in constant motion. Akinmusire's work is unorthodox, sometimes even confrontational, but always purposeful. You'll find his fingerprints in jazz, yes, but also in classical circles, hip-hop collaborations, spoken word suites, and ambient experiments. He doesn't just borrow from genres, he dissolves their borders. Over the years, he's been a regular name in critics' polls and a recipient of prestigious honors, from the Doris Duke Foundation, the MAP Fund, the Kennedy Center, and residencies at international festivals like Berlin Jazz and Montreux Jazz. Ambrose Akinmusire believes in the spiritual and practical value of art. His compositions are emotional landscapes, richly textured stories that reflect community, time, and the pursuit of something greater. Ambrose Akinmusire doesn't just write music, he builds entire worlds. Worlds that challenge, weep, and breathe. And that was some insight into the biography of Ambrose Akinmusire, more details coming up. Also coming up, some trending music news. Stay tuned to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva to find out more. We'll be right back after some music. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. On this week's show, it's all about Ambrose Akinmusire, a leading jazz trumpeter. During this hour, we will be talking about his biography. Ambrose Akinmusire is a man who's redefined what jazz trumpet can say. Born in Oakland, California, Ambrose didn't just grow up with the Bay Area's vibrant cultural rhythm, he channeled it. A standout talent from his high school days, he caught the eye of saxophonist Steve Coleman during a jazz workshop at Berkeley High. Coleman didn't just give him praise, he gave him a ticket to Europe, inviting him to tour with the Five Elements Band. And that was just the beginning. With roots planted in the Berkeley High Jazz Ensemble and the Montreux Jazz Festival's Next Generation Orchestra, Akinmusire's path was clear but never conventional. He studied at the Manhattan School of Music, sharpened his artistry at USC, and deepened his soul at the Thelonious Monk Institute. In 2007, his brilliance was undeniable, taking home top honors from both the Thelonious Monk International Jazz Competition and the Carmine Caruso Trumpet Solo Competition. That same year, his debut album Prelude to Cora introduced the world to a sound that was equal parts elegance and fire. But Akinmusire's music doesn't stop at technical excellence. It asks questions, probes memory, tells stories. His Blue Note debut When the Heart Emerges Glistening dropped in 2011 and showed us just how bold jazz could be. With a band of heavy hitters like Walter Smith III and Justin Brown, he explored vulnerability, struggle, and beauty all through that horn. In 2014, he dropped The Imagined Savior is Far Easier to Paint, an album that blends emotion with activism, tender, provocative, and wholly original. 4 years later, Origami Harvest turned heads again, fusing strings, jazz, and spoken word in a genre-defined soundscape that the New York Times named one of the best jazz albums of 2018. And in 2020, amidst a world reckoning with grief and change, Akinmusire gave us On the Tender Spot of Every Callous Moment, a poetic title and an even more poetic album. Backed by his longtime quartet, he offered something raw and reflective, and the Grammy committee took notice. And his reach, it spanned several genres. You might have heard him closing out Kendrik Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly. That final track, that trumpet, that's Akinmusire. Always stretching the boundaries, always questioning, always listening. From the North Sea Festival's Paul Akatavall to multiple wins in Downbeat Critics Poll, Ambrose Akinmusire hasn't just played jazz, he's shaped it. And he continues to challenge what jazz can be in the 21st century. So that was some insight into the biography of Ambrose Akinmusire, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. We are going for a short break, we'll be right back after that. Here's Ambrose Akinmusire with Bubbles. Welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. On this week's episode, it's all about the biography and best hits of Ambrose Akinmusire. Now it's time for some trending album news. The jazz group Yachtut are an 8-piece jazz powerhouse led by drummer, composer, and bandleader Leo Yacht. Their first album, Earworm, has just dropped. It's a bold, modern big band statement that's well worth your time. Now here's the thing about Earworm. It's not just jazz, it's Brooklyn jazz. It's trap meets big band. It's cannonball chords and saxophone duels. It's rush hour grit and late night joyrides. In just 6 tracks, Yachtut takes you on a 45-minute tour of high-energy compositions and cinematic soundscapes. Take City Bike Anthem, a jazzy, horn-full joyride that feels like you're dodging taxis on a breezy afternoon in New York. Or Make It, which sounds like a full-blown naval battle. If that battle was scored for horns, drums, and a spirit of creative freedom. What's wild is what's not on this album. No guitar, no piano, no chorded instruments. Instead, the woodwinds and brass come together like one mega instrument, tightly anchored by Josh Oguchioni on bass and Leo Yacht himself behind the drums. The result, a massive unified sound that's punchy, smart and totally self-assured. Of course, it's not all swagger. On Song of Hope, the band shows restraint, tapping into the ache and anxiety that so often lurks under the surface of modern life. It's meditative, maybe even mournful, but never melodramatic. It reminds us that jazz isn't just about what's played, it's about what's felt. It's a dueling saxophone showdown that's chaotic, cheeky and impossible not to love. Earworm is the kind of debut that announces a vision, confident, collaborative and completely unafraid of the unknown. You can stream the album on all platforms. So whether you're new to the big band or already deep into the scene, Yachtert is one of the freshest things to hit the jazz airwaves this year. Big sound, big heart, zero pretense. So that was some trending album news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. We'll be right back after some music. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some of Ambrose Akinmusire's best albums of all time. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. On this week's episode, one of modern jazz's boldest visionaries, Ambrose Akinmusire. During this hour, we will be talking about some of his best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of what's coming up. His music doesn't fit into categories, and that's exactly the point. Across three of his most powerful albums, Ambrose blends jazz tradition with poetic experimentation, emotional vulnerability and urgent social commentary. It began with When the Heart Emerges Glistening, his Blue Note debut. From Confessions to My Unborn Daughter to Henya, Ambrose and his quintet stretched jazz into something personal, conversational and deeply alive. Then came The Imagined Savior is Far Easier to Paint. Think spoken word strings and vocals that haunt and heal. On Roll Call for Those Absent, a child reads the names of victims of violence. The silence says as much as the notes. And in 2020, on The Tender Spot of Every Callous Moment brought it all inward. On Tide of Hyacinth, chaos reigns. On Hooded, Ambrose sits alone at a Rhodes, whispering grief in the language of silence. So that was some insight into what's coming up during this hour, and you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. We'll be right back after some music. Stay tuned. That was Alex Bounion with 108 Degrees. Spyro Gyra with Nothing to Lose. William Elwood featuring Charlie Bierschardt with Beside the Night. Chris Botti with 1,000 Kisses Deep. Prayerful with Moonglide. Pete Project with Bad Boys Funk. And Ambrose Akinmusire with Memo. Welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. Today we are diving into the creative world of one of modern jazz's most visionary trumpeters, Ambrose Akinmusire. During this hour, we will be talking about some of his best albums of all time. Ambrose Akinmusire's music isn't easy to define, and that's exactly the point. Across three of his most powerful albums, he fuses jazz tradition with poetic experimentation, social urgency and emotional vulnerability. These aren't just albums, they're documents, emotional atlases for our time. It began with When the Heart Emerges Glistening. This was his Blue Note debut and it came out swinging. From the opening notes of Confessions to My Unborn Daughter, it was clear. Akinmusire wasn't here to play it safe. The music, while grounded in the jazz tradition, refused to follow a straight path. It leaps, it stretches, it breathes. With longtime collaborators Walter Smith III on tenor sax, Gerald Clayton on piano, Harish Raghavan on bass and Justin Brown on drums, the quintet becomes a hive mind. Whether they're delivering tight, punchy hard bop or drifting into tone poems like Henya, the interplay is stunning. And then there's a duet with Clayton on What's New, a quiet, intimate conversation. Akinmusire may challenge form, but his roots are deep. Deep enough to hold a moment of stillness in the palm of his hand. Fast forward to 2014 and Akinmusire paints with a broader, more daring brush. The Imagined Savior is Far Easier to Paint is an album that's as literary as it's musical. Each track unfolding like a short story or a scene in a larger emotional drama. He brings in guest vocalists, Becca Stevens, Theo Bleckman, Al Spix of Cold Specs, who doesn't just sing but adds texture. On Asium, Bleckman's ghostly voice floats beside Ambrose's shimmering trumpet, like a conversation between memory and breath. The album moves far beyond jazz. Strings drift in, spoken word slices through. Roll Call for Those Absent is one of the most haunting pieces you'll ever hear, a child reciting names, Trevor Martin among them, against a backdrop of spare, solemn keys. The silence hits harder than any chord. It's not just a tribute, it's a demand to listen. And then came 2020, and with it, an album that feels like a quiet reckoning. On the Tender Spot of Every Callous Moment. It opens in chaos, like a panic attack underwater. On Tide of Hyacinth, Cuban percussionist Jesus Diaz chants in Yoruba over crashing drums and urgent piano. It's intense, it's suffocating, but then comes relief. The band, now a tight-knit quartet, lock into a telepathic groove. On Moon and Roy, you hear everything. Tension, release, fracture, healing. But maybe the most devastating moment, the final track, Hooded. No trumpet, no band, just Ambrose at the Rhodes keyboard. a whisper of grief, a hymn of silence, a lament for names lost. In these 3 albums, Ambrose Akinmusire does more than just make music. He constructs sonic architecture for sorrow, resilience and resistance. He's not just a trumpet player, he's a truth teller, a composer of conscience. So that was a quick glimpse into some of Ambrose Akinmusire's best albums of all time, and you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Yasha De Silva. We are going for a short break, we'll be right back after that. Here's Ambrose Akinmusire with Old. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Yasha De Silva. On this week's episode, it's about the biography and best hits of Ambrose Akinmusire. Now it's time for some trending album news. On Central Coast, the Jazz Society of Santa Cruz is keeping the beat going strong with their twice-monthly backbeat jam sessions downtown at Pono Hawaiian Grill. This past Sunday's jam brought together some of Santa Cruz's jazz icons: guitarist Gino Raugi, vocalist Gianni Liu, baritone saxophonist Marcus Betancourt, flautist Suki Wesling, and tenor sax players Ken Koenig and Stephen Gray, all regulars in this deeply rooted community gathering. These jam sessions happen every second and fourth Sunday of the month, and they're more than just open mics. They are workshops, showcases, and the neighborhood hangouts all rolled into one. With a house band that sets the bar high but keeps the doors wide open, instrumentalists and vocalists of all levels are encouraged to join, experiment, and grow. Founded in 2000, the Jazz Society of Santa Cruz is a non-profit, volunteer-run organization dedicated to preserving the rich jazz tradition in the area, while creating a truly inclusive space for musicians and listeners alike. And coming up, mark your calendars, the Society's biggest event of the year takes place on September 7th at the Coomba Jazz Center. It's a Jazz Society showcase, a benefit concert headlined by the legendary West Coast guitarist Bruce Forman, who's played alongside the likes of Dizzy Gillespie and Ray Brown. Local talent will also shine, with pianist John Dryden, percussionist Rick Walter, and Santa Cruz favorites Ben Flox and Aaron Caceres, both returning home for the evening. It's a celebration, a tribute, and a fundraiser all in one. For tickets and more info, head to jazzsociety.showcase.eventbrite.com. And that was some trending album news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Yasha De Silva. We'll be right back after some music. When we come back, we're going to be talking about more of Ambrose Akinmusire's best albums of all time. Stay tuned.